You know, we see them every single day on TV, in magazines, on our favorite podcasts. I'm talking about The Interview. It's pretty much how we get to know the world's most fascinating people, right? But what if? What if this thing we take for granted is actually, well, a battleground? That's what we're digging into today. Is The Interview a beautiful art form, or is it basically an assault? I mean, think about it. This question really pits two big ideas against each other: the search for truth versus the right to privacy. On one hand, you've got the interview as this noble craft, a tool that helps us understand the world. But on the other hand, it can feel like a straight up attack, like a public interrogation. And believe it or not, these two views have been at war for like over 100 years. Some people make these huge claims that, in its highest form, the interview is a source of pure truth. But then you've got the people on the other side, often the subjects themselves, especially the famous ones, who see it as a total violation, an intrusion so personal it's like someone is literally stealing a piece of your soul. Okay, so to really get to the bottom of this conflict, let's start with the case against the interview. And what a case it is! It's been made by some of history's most brilliant, most creative minds. And we're not talking about just a mild dislike here. Oh no. We're talking about a deep, profound horror of being interviewed. I mean, look at this list. Lewis Carroll, the guy who gave us Alice in Wonderland, H.G. Wells, Saul Bellow, Rudyard Kipling, all of them shared this incredibly powerful skepticism of the whole practice. And Rudyard Kipling, oh man, he did not hold back. Just listen to the sheer force of his words here. He didn't just dislike interviews. He saw them as an actual crime. He called the act immoral, an assault, something cowardly and vile. I mean, that is some seriously strong language. But here's where it gets really interesting. The very same Rudyard Kipling who called interviewing a crime, well, it turns out that just a few years before he said all that, he actually conducted an interview himself. And guess who with? None other than Mark Twain. It's just a fantastic bit of irony, and it shows you just how complicated this whole thing really is. And this image, wow, it perfectly captures that feeling of violation. The novelist Saul Bellow, who, by the way, sometimes did agree to interviews, described the experience as feeling like thumbprints on his windpipe. Can you imagine? It's just such a powerful metaphor for being suffocated, pressured, and totally controlled. So, okay, if being interviewed can feel like an assault, how on earth do you survive it? Or maybe even master it? Well, let's turn to our main case study for today. Umberto Eco. This was a man who became a global celebrity. And to really get how he handled all that pressure, you first have to understand his really unique philosophy about time. So first things first, who exactly was Umberto Eco? Well, to put it simply, he was an absolute heavyweight intellectual. I mean, he was a university professor, a world-famous scholar of semiotics, that's the study of signs and symbols, and an expert in medieval history. And then, at 50 years old, he decides to add something completely unexpected to his resume: best-selling novelist. And his level of productivity was, well, it was legendary. He wrote dozens of academic books, tons of essays, countless articles, all while also writing these blockbuster novels. It's no wonder his fellow novelist David Lodge basically said what everyone else was thinking: I can't understand how one man can do all the things Eco does. So, what was his secret? How did he do it all? When people asked him, Eco's answer was so simple, but at the same time so profound. He just said, I work in empty spaces. All right, empty spaces. Let's break that down. Eco had this idea that our lives are just full of these little gaps of time. He called them interstices. You know, the moments we're waiting in line or waiting for a file to download. Most of us just see that as dead time, right? Wasted time. But Eco, he saw it as an opportunity. His most famous example is just brilliant. He claimed that while he was waiting for an elevator to get to his apartment, he could write an entire article. You know, the most famous result of all that productive work was his very first novel, The Name of the Rose. The success of that book was so unbelievably huge, it turned this quiet, unassuming academic into a global celebrity, and it forced him right into the world of interviews that so many other authors absolutely dreaded. But what's so fascinating is that even after he became this global superstar, Eco's identity never changed. He'd always say, "I am a university professor who writes novels on Sundays." That's it. And this refusal to let fame define him, that gave him this unique kind of power, this special perspective when he had to deal with the press. And we need to be clear about something. This was not some light, breezy beach read. The Name of the Rose is a really serious detective novel. It dives deep into metaphysics, theology, medieval history. I mean, it's the kind of book you'd think, okay, maybe some academics will like this. You would not expect it to sell over 10 million copies around the world.
So yeah, this massive success was a shock to absolutely everyone. But maybe most of all to his American publisher. I mean, they loved the book personally, but they had very, very low expectations for how it would actually sell.
So, what was their initial sales projection for the entire United States? A measly 3,000 copies. Just 3,000! And their logic was kind of simple. In a country where, as the publisher said, nobody has seen a cathedral or studies Latin, why would a dense book about medieval monks ever take off? Well, they were wrong. And not just a little wrong, they were spectacularly wrong. The book didn't sell 3,000 copies. No. In the US alone, it sold close to 3 million. That is 1,000 times what they predicted. It wasn't just a success, it was a full-blown cultural phenomenon that nobody, and I mean nobody, saw coming. So what about Eco himself? What did he think about all this? He basically just shrugged and admitted he had no clue why it was so successful. He just called it a mystery. He figured that if he'd written the same book 10 years earlier or 10 years later, it probably would have flopped. For him, it was just this unexplainable perfect alignment of a book and a specific moment in time. And that really is the central mystery, isn't it? The story of Umberto Eco and The Name of the Rose leaves us with this incredible puzzle. It's not just about one book. It's about how ideas travel, how they find their audience against all odds. Which brings us to our final, really big question. What is it that makes a difficult, complex idea suddenly connect with millions of people?